So I have great pleasure in introducing John, who is going to speak tonight on Europe, America and democracy.
That democracy remains a key element in the way we judge international crises. We judge this is something which we judge things by whether or not they advance or retard progress towards a freer and more democratic society. The democratic revolution in world politics was more or less unstoppable. Between 1989, say, and 2001, let's say September the 11th, 2001, there was a conventional wisdom in the world. There is the erosion of trade and capital barriers globally. There is also mass migration of peoples. We are also seeing at the same time the erosion of the nation state. We are seeing not only supranational bodies which are taking power from the nation state, but we are also seeing a new form of international law. All of these developments together produced, and they were expressed in books like Tom Friedman's The Lexus and the Olive Tree. This conventional wisdom suggested that we were moving towards a new post-national global order. Now, during this period, when people looked at these changes, if they saw an obstacle to them at all, it was the United States. The United States was both the indispensable prop and the large obstacle to this system working as they thought effective. Of course, international order depended on the US for enforcement of its legal decisions and for its occasional interventions. So in the first place, the United States was necessary for the workings of this institution. It was the power that could actually move men and materials around the world quickly, either for peaceful or for warlike purposes. At the same time, the US refused, as a very self-confident sovereign state, to be bound solely to have its policy determined by UN decisions and by other international agencies. It was kind of like a mammoth frozen in Westphalian ice, but it was a very necessary mammoth when you wanted force to be used. And then some people flew 2 planes into the Twin Towers, and this entire utopian new moral order in world politics took a backseat as the UN began to act like a conventional sovereign state in pursuit of its vital interests in Afghanistan and later Iraq. In doing so, it recruited other states which had armies and intelligence services, could be of use and assistance, in particular this country, but others too, to be its allies. And they acted, and they stepped forward and acted in this way, and they did so seeking international approval and the support of the international community and getting diluted versions of it, but not getting what most people considered to be the support of the UN Security Council on a key moment. At this point, the United States intervened partly to justify its intervention, but partly expressing its own sentiments as a great power, began to emphasize the importance of spreading democracy in the Middle East and to defending democracy where it existed elsewhere as a basic element in its foreign policy. Radical Islam, as I say, is a threat, but not to democracy and not to a structure of world order which is based in large part upon democratic ideas. The main threat it poses to us, and it's a very serious one, is of destroying a city and killing millions of people. Such an act, even if repeated several times, would not replace a single infidel government with an Islamist one, let alone advance seriously towards a world caliphate. Although there are enormous divisions of opinion and interest between the United States, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, China, India, and so on, almost the one cause in which they are all united and in a way that means they are determined to do something about it, is opposition to radical Islam. My impression is that the success of the surge in Iraq has already dented the myth of the invincible al-Qaeda guerrilla and established an Iraqi government that will be reasonably stable and moderately democratic, and therefore a serious power in the Middle East. But while our attention was turned to al-Qaeda, a new old enemy emerged to plague the democratic world, namely the resurgent authoritarian regimes of Russia, China, and Central Asia, and others too. Countries like China and Russia are substantial powers with real influence in world politics. Now, where has their power suddenly emerged from in the last 10 to 15 years? Because 10 to 15 years ago, China was certainly a growing power, but none of these countries were either powerful or really threatening to us. In the case of Russia, Russia seemed both weak and also compliant. Well, I think the following factors have emerged to support the new authoritarians. First of all, economics. China, of course, has had this astounding growth rate. Both China and Russia are also leading members of international institutions. They're both members of the UN Security Council. That, in the most direct sense, gives them the ability to influence major decisions. States like Russia and China, undemocratic though they are, at least know who they are. Only states that possess an identity have the capacity to react, to defend themselves, to see what their interests are, and to take action to defend them. It has given new self-confidence to authoritarian regimes throughout Eurasia and elsewhere. A lot of Europeans, he doesn't say Americans, he doesn't say Westerners, he says a lot of Europeans are worried that the new authoritarians pose an ideological competition with the EU. The structure of the European Union is one it sees itself as a new kind of entity in world politics. It says this repeatedly. It says it doesn't want to be a superpower exactly, but it wants to be more than a confederation or a free trade area. It wants to develop a new kind of politics. It is an entity that is more liberal than democratic. It has a number of rules and regulations that attempt to protect minorities. It establishes these rules through legal processes. It wants to encourage world institutions and global institutions to go along the same lines. So it's very supportive of bodies like the Kyoto Treaty, the ICC, various UN organizations, which again are, in a sense, more remarkable for being liberal, by which I mean concerned with protecting rights, than they are being democratic, by which I mean expressing majority views. This, in the EU, is one example of a broader international trend, which is very marked in Europe and less marked in the United States. And that is the transfer of power from elected, accountable bodies to non-elected, unaccountable ones. The difference between the EU and the United States in the kind of conflicts which I've been describing, international conflicts from Iraq to Rwanda, has been that the United States has been less prepared to follow the instructions and injunctions of international bodies, and the EU has been more prepared and indeed insistent upon doing so. It's an institution, the features of which are more interested in removing power from the majority, which the rulers suspect, and vesting it in a new class of lawyers, human rights bureaucrats, and other international and national officials who no longer wish to be subordinate to democratic institutions. When I look at the international situation today and the democratic, and through the lens of democratic concerns, as I say, I see not this new Cold War between authoritarians and democrats, but a three-sided conflict between authoritarians, on the one hand, and on the other, between people who want our lives to be run by institutions which are far away and over which we have little control, and those who still believe that the liberal democratic state is the best way that men and women have yet found of ordering their collective lives. Thank you.